Hello, and welcome to episode 457 of the Crate and Crowbar. Shit, I'm keeping going. The Crate and Crowbar. Quite rare that I screw up the intro as well as the outro, but we'll get to that. My name's Chris Thurston. It's the 2nd of June, 2026. And tonight, I am joined by Marsh Davies.
Hello.
And Jamie Britton.
Hello.
And together, as a trio, we're going to invite you in to a fantasy world where Britain is still internationally relevant, and B, you, the person listening to this, could conceivably impulse purchase a Land Rover. But before we get to that, you've both got game announcements this week. You've both got game-related news, things you've worked on. Marsh, would you like to...
Yeah, let's start with the unsuccessful one.
It's not a competition.
Yes, we finally released Gold Teeth, which is our tabletop role-playing game about pirates in the late 18th century in the Caribbean.
Yeah.
How
are you feeling getting to the finish line on second role-playing game?
I mean, it's gratifying to have survived the process, I suppose. But now I'm free to die. So that that's a plus. It's a big book. I've put a lot of hours in. I've basically worked every hour that I could work, at least since January. And obviously I worked before that as well, but like it's just been crunched since January. And now that it's out, I have a very, very strange feeling. It's almost like I'd been like a popsicle in a mold, and now I have been demolded, and I'm now just melting. Yeah, and is that good? Is that how people are meant to feel?
I think so.
That's probably good.
The experience I've had of finishing books has been, or getting that first draft off at least, is of like, oh, I've woven a load-bearing shell of stress around myself. And now that it's been removed, I will briefly hold this shape. So yeah, I think the ice lolly analogy is a good one. But like, there are no bones in here. You know what I mean? There's no stick in this lolly. Like...
Yeah, it's odd. When you, like, because this is not just like, I mean, I'm sure this is true of writing novels as well, Chris, and you could probably speak to this. But because there's a rule set as well involved in a TTRPG, you just have to, as you're going through the book, and because it cross-references itself continuously throughout, you just have to hold an immensity of information in your brain in like some kind of like superposition at all times. And now that I don't have to do that, I've sort of just, it's like, I just reformatted my brain and it's just completely empty. And I don't know what to do with that space now. I suppose I should try and like memorize my own phone number or something, but I'm not going to.
Are you at the point yet where you've completely forgotten ever doing any of it? Because that happens to me.
Yeah, I am. I think it's just this like scarring, like cognitive scarring process that's happening now. I'm just my brain is turning into a kind of tissue that is no longer plastic, just a big meaty, chewy lump of cartilage.
I don't know if this is similar to your experience, because I take a lot of notes at the start of a novel project. Like I make, because I have to, partly doing licensed fiction, pitch things and lay out the plan and so on. But after that point, yeah, you're right. Like that whole structure is being held in my brain and is like a part of me, almost like feels like physically sometimes. Like I carry it around all the time. I imagine maybe it's different for people who are like really diligent external planners, like, Post-its on a board or something like that. But yeah, I think it's it's interesting. The project I've been working on recently, which I can't unfortunately say very much about, but it's been the longest I've been working on a single book at all. And that the hardest part of it is like not letting that sort of like mental sense of it go when because it is hard to sustain for any amount of time past a certain point. Maybe this is the kind of, I don't know, it seems to go hand in hand with like a kind of self-imposed crunch to get things over the line, at least for me, because that's sort of all part of that same I'm just going to go into this mental place for a while, and when I get out, the thing will happen, and I won't remember it having happened. But you almost get to like re-experience it later as as a viewer, right?
Yeah, I'm hoping that once we get it printed, it'll feel different in my hands than it has done. Because I think I went through that process with the first book as well, where I was also completely burnt out by the time I finished
that's
the PDF.
The word.
Yeah, but then when I had the physical object in my hand, I was looking through it, and it felt completely new again to me in a really pleasing way. And like, maybe that'll happen with this, or maybe I'll turn to the first page and find a typo and I'll kill myself. So
both.
It could go,
Well, I mean, I've read all of it, I think, and I have to say, and I'm not just saying this, but I think it's completely brilliant. I think one of the things that I was struck with by it is, like, despite sort of being vaguely aware of how stressed you have been getting the thing done, like, it just fizzes with, like, it occurred to me as I was reading it that, like, writing an RPG source book type thing, it's like, by its nature, immensely fiddly work, right? And you're also doing all the illustrations, and you're also kind of, things have to reference each other. It's a sort of thing that I couldn't do in a billion years. But, like, you can... that each page is full of kind of authorial voice and enthusiasm and like a consistent style. Sometimes these things can be quite droll, or sometimes they're often too like edgelordy. And I think the mood of both Teeth and Gold Teeth is just really unique because it's playful as well as being kind of funny and very, very you and Jim with your kind of sardonic sense of humours. But like, yeah, I think it's just a real achievement, really, because it just feels so full of creativity, but also a really nice attitude to spend time with, if that makes sense.
Well, thank you so much. I'm glad that that it comes across. I'm completely blind to how it will be received from this point on. It just, it's I've eaten too much of it. I can no longer taste any flavors.
It's got one of the best, like, a description of play sections I think I've read for quite a while, where it's got the GM / Marsh urging a player to just make up some ship bollocks in lieu of actually knowing how ships work in any way, shape, or form. I think you include no one knows how they work. Just make it up.
Yeah, you get points for doing that in the game. Yeah. That's I think if anybody who had
ship bollocks is in blue as a sort of hot link. Yeah, fantastic. Like, that's a concept in this game.
I cannot imagine the kind of psychological damage this book would do to anybody with an authentic knowledge of sailing. I think it might just kill them outright, which I think's good. Anyway, you could buy it. You could buy it from teethrpg.io/gold-teeth, and your other games bias are there as well.
I'm very excited to get mine, I have to say, because Teeth is great, and I've only all I have seen of Gold Teeth so far is what has been what you've posted, basically. So, yeah, I'm very excited. But what a piece of work, in every sense.
It's over now. Goodbye.
Yeah. And no one can tell you that it isn't just the word honk 100,000 times.
Yeah.
Because that's how this is going to feel.
I genuinely had nightmares around Teeth where I'd get the book back and it would just be a single word repeated throughout.
I didn't say that for no reason. I had exactly the same. Because, you get to the end and it's like, oh, this was all an email I had to send to a printer. Like, yeah. And then at some point it comes back and it's a book. And I do hope you get to enjoy that moment, because it must be different with the TTRPG though as well. Because here's a question: would you play it?
Oh yeah, in fact I've promised to play it. I promised to run it for some people with now some trepidation. Like, had they asked me to do this like 3 months ago, I'd have been well up for it. I wouldn't have had time, but I would have been like cognitively capable of doing it. But now I've just flushed the entire project out of my brain the second we hit publish. I don't know if I'm going to be able to do it, but I'll give it a go anyway. Maybe I'll discover it doesn't work.
No, I'm really excited. And Jamie, to segue, you have also had a big gaming announcement this week.
Yes. So at the time of recording, the full trailer for the game I've been working on isn't out, but that will be out by the time you hear this. So it will have shown at Jeff Keighley's Summer Game Fest at some point. But on the Tuesday prior to that, we did our game reveal, which was Mike Brown, my boss, doing a sort of in-studio thing, revealing the gameplay, revealing the kind of basic premise of the game. So the game is called Clutch. It's an open-world, narrative-led racing game. It has a kind of sort of prestige racing side and a street racing side, and also a kind of heist action side. I know you guys were very enjoying the sight of the grappling hook harpoon there. Always a good sign. And yeah, it's so you will have seen that, the people I'm talking to now, and then the trailer will have come out on Friday, which also reveals the setting of the game. So that's it. The game is set in and around Monaco and the south of France, and the cast as well, which is really cool. We've got Tosin Cole, Lil Sims playing his sister Cass, living legend Jane Perry, and getting to work with her has been fantastic. And also Peter Serafinowicz playing the mogul at the centre of things, who is excellent. He's everything you'd hope for from a Peter Serafinowicz. Me and my friend Matty have been saying the words, "Was there ever any doubt?" in a Peter Serafinowicz voice for decades, because it's something he says in an outtake of Spaced. And I was able to get him to record himself saying that to send to my friend Matty. It's very good. Which is obviously the most important thing out of all of this. So yeah, that's the game basically. It's a driving game. It's made by a bunch of people who used to make the Forza Horizon games and now spun off into this. And yeah, it's cool. I probably won't talk too much about it, to be honest, because it's kind of very much a team effort and very much hundreds of people working on it. But yeah, hopefully it's gone down well. I don't know at the time of recording, but yeah.
To the extent that you can say at the time of recording, how has it felt for you? Because this is, and do forgive me if I'm wrong, this is your first game project, right, Jamie?
This is my first game project. It's something, it's my dream job, getting to be a lead writer on a video game. It's been the thing I've kind of always wanted to do, and it's something that I kind of Crate and Crowbar has been a big part of. So. I was able to play episodes of the podcast that I'd been on. I just started talking about games on this podcast rather than TV and stuff with Marsh. And so that was a really useful thing to have. And also just, as I've told you before, listening to this podcast was the thing that kind of got me into thinking about games in a more kind of deep way anyway. So I kind of hold the things in my head at the same time. I'm very grateful to Crate and Crowbar and the Discord for kind of giving me a foothold and all that sort of stuff. So yeah, it's exciting. It's cool.
A while ago, you sent a photo of yourself in a mocap studio holding two katanas, I think. I was wondering, do katanas play a part in this driving game?
Yes, It's a driving ninja game. No, sadly, the katanas do not appear in the game. They were just on the wall at the mocap studio, and I had spent several weeks managing not to pick them up and get people to take pictures of me with all the weaponry and stuff. And then I failed to prevent myself from doing that. This is the mocap studio Centroid, where a good deal of video games are sort of shot and a lot of movies are. And so they do have an immense amount of toys there, including big warhammers and flails and tank guns and stuff like that. Neat.
It looks great. It's weird because I'm not at all a car person. I don't find cars to be interesting cultural objects any more than I would get excited than a lawnmower or a strimmer or something like that. But then two of my favorite games of all time have also been car games, like Burnout Paradise Burnout Takedown as well, and then Driver San Francisco, which is probably the closest analog to the sort of game you're producing, which is a very narrative led driving game. And so when car games do it for me, they really do it for me in a way which is kind of strange.
I am not a car guy at all. As I was describing on the Discord earlier, we did a day of drifting as part of our time at Maverick, and I was assured by the crazy lady running the drifting academy who said, "Oh, I left one of the big places because they were all about the safety." Before I strapped into a car with her. But when I learned to drift, I'd asked her if it was okay that I only learned on an automatic, and she was like, "Yeah, it's fine." Reader, it was not fine. I needed to learn to use the clutch at the same time as I learned to drift, which was very stupid. So just like with anything really, like you just have to find the right person. The people who work at Maverick, who are all our car nuts, are the most infectious and approachable people. Like the game has a really nice attitude to it. Like, yeah, there's an inclusivity to it rather than exclusivity, which I think is hopefully all over the game we're making.
Awesome. Yeah, I'm really excited, both for the game and for you, because I think it's such a cool moment. We could use this segue to talk about another game that involves not just cars, but Land Rovers. So this is quite likely to be a bit of a one-game pod, I suspect, in terms of what we've all been playing. Because if you haven't guessed, what we have all been playing is 007 First Light, IO Interactive's of Hitman fame's James Bond game that everyone seems to be playing this week. And I guess I'll kick this off, and I appreciate I've made a glib Land Rover joke twice, but we need to talk about the arc, I think, of the opening of this game and where it is and what it is. What it is a slightly more narrative-driven, third-person sort of stealth sandboxy-ish. And when I say sandbox, I don't mean open world. I mean giving you environments to deploy a range of kind of like tools and approaches to kind of crack open as a cool spy, basically, game from IO. So taking a lot, the Hitman DNA is very much on show in a lot of respects, but it is also, in a lot of other respects, a sort of major sort of AAA narrative action adventure game. It is like a ledge game, and what I mean by that is it's a game where you'll shimmy along the ledge. And I think I don't mean, again, I'm trying to be glib with that. It's a really specific genre where it's like, we need a dialogue sequence to last a certain amount of time. So here's 3 ledges and a pipe, which is the amount of time it takes to have this conversation that you need to have. So it's that, and I hope people can imagine what I mean by that. And it's this sort of...
I think first you're going to have to define ledge, Chris.
Ledge. Like every single game in this category. I don't care what you're talking about, Last of Us, Uncharted, anything Naughty Dog's ever made. I don't care if you're talking about Red Dead. There's going to be a sequence where you shimmy so that you're slowed down appropriately for something to happen while being sort of engaged mentally in either jumping up or down or hopping a little gap. Like, it's in all of these.
Could you define a ledge in 3 more ways, please?
Okay. Well, you know that famous bit in GoldenEye where Sean Bean's character 006 is hanging from the bottom of a half collapsed
for Queen and Country, James.
He says, "For England, James," and Pierce Brosnan says, "No, for me." And then he goes, "Ah!" The thing he was holding on to was a ledge. Like, if you need to what he did there is he pressed circle when he should have pressed X, and he let go of the ledge. Yeah. Do I press X to get up there, James? No, press O. Like, it's that. O, circle.
What is this thing I've got my hand in, James?
I don't want to get sidetracked by talking about GoldenEye. I think about GoldenEye so far too much.
One does not simply shimmy into Mordor.
Yeah. It's a major. You can't make a game without ledges. I don't know how a car handles ledge grappling hook. You've already solved it. Wow, you're so far ahead. So yeah, I'm just trying to paint a picture for our audience about where in this territory it sits between what people might expect from an IO game and the broader genre of ledge games that it is in, and it definitely is in, and the balance thereof. I think there's also a little bit of Arkham in its DNA and those games and so on. And the other thing it is, which is sort of interesting, because I know there have been Bond discussions on the pod more broadly, is it is also, in a big way, like the first big Bond thing of the Daniel Craig era. So this is a young 27-year-old Gen Z Bond embarking on his first pre-007 missions for MI6. And it is a reboot, and it sort of feels like a reboot. And I think I definitely had those moments playing it where it's like this. I mean, Amazon and MGM involved, and clearly, it has a lot of the hallmarks of a lot of aspects of the last few years of James Bond, including shoulder barging people and product placement, which I think and so kind of interesting as a cultural object in that respect as well. But I won't try and explain ledges for a fourth time. Instead, what I will say is I feel like, to kick this off, we all had a very similar experience with it, of being instantly really impressed by how slick, I would say, its first 4 hours, 4.5, 5 hours are. And because I know we're all past that point, we may have some other things to say. I kind of wanted to start there and be like, I was certainly pleasantly very surprised by how confident its opening act is. How did you each find it? Marsh?
Yeah, I really enjoyed the opening act. I've been predicting that this game would be a stinker for a while, and I'm glad to have been proved wholly wrong. I think I just didn't really. I think a lot of people were excited about it being a Hitman game, and I never really expected it to be a Hitman game, because a Hitman game is not generally the kind of thing that studios make with film licenses,
right?
And they always tend towards being more authored and controlled and linear, and they have fairly, and the initial visions of this game that we're given, where there was fairly canned spectacles of QTE adjacent car chases and things, fine in their own right, but I was uncertain that IO would be have the credentials to deliver on something that harnessed that sort of glitzy cinematic bombast in a way which was satisfactory and kind of meshed with their expertise in doing these kind of more sandboxy things. But they do unevenly, I would say, across the course of the game. But that opening, I think, is a super, super strong introduction to it. And I think their take on Bond's origin story is initially extremely kind of vital and engaging, where he is, I don't exactly know what his rank is. He's some kind of a low-ranking airman who is on a aeroplane of some kind.
I think it's a helicopter.
A helicopter? Yes, that's right. Yeah, yes, yeah.
We're getting there.
It's a sky car, Just,
yeah.
And the mission goes wrong, and he's the only survivor of an air crash with his much more accomplished SAS colleagues being killed, and so he has to take over their mission, essentially. And that is a really great way to introduce him. Everybody is surprised by his competence and indeed basic survival of this situation, and that's great. That is so superb. And where it goes from there, I'm a little less convinced by, in that I think it is very competently done. I think there's it moves into this essentially training sequence where he becomes an agent, and that is used to kind of rapid fire tutorialize a lot of the mechanics in the game, and that is amazingly slick. I think Jamie, you were saying just how good it was, because it's cut in a cinematic way, so you get what is essentially a montage sequence, but it's also a tutorial sequence, and it dispenses with the tutorial in such an economic and effective way. Admittedly, I immediately forgot most of the things that tutorialized me, but that's my brain, not the game's fault. But then whilst that is really impressive from were it just any game, I'm not super into the kind of I think I called it Hogwarts for spies sort of vibe that it's going for, with these baby spies and palling around, living in their bougie flat share, discussing curry and who's going to do the laundry in Islington. I just don't give a fuck. I can't imagine anybody. And what's weird about it is the game sort of knows that nobody gives a fuck about this, because it barely commits to it before it then changes it up. And so the entire point of doing it is somewhat undermined. It's sort of meant to introduce this sort of camaraderie between you and your colleagues before a big seismic event happens and things change. But because you basically walk into that apartment, then immediately walk out of it, and then things change. It doesn't really kind of have the gravitas ultimately that it thinks it does, and it sort of then therefore doesn't really have a purpose, as well as being just not particularly to my taste. I don't care about these sort of bildungsroman sort of stuff that much.
I think for me in that sequence, it's funny because I also don't like necessarily buy the characters in the relationship, or at least like, you know, it's one of those things where it's how much of a supporting cast does Bond really need when you're also meeting like M and Q and the others, and you have a sense of where this is going. But I do, you know, they have fun. I think there's quite a lot of like, you know, it's obviously very devoted in its desire to kind of bring particular Bond things to life. But then there's also little angles that you haven't really seen before, like, you know, pointedly, these are all aspiring 00 agents in training, and he is the extra one no one wanted to be there, and he's the seventh. Like that sort of little like cute, like, well, of course there's another 6 before him, and so who were they? And it's these people, and that kind of thing. And I think, you know, while I wouldn't necessarily be like super excited for a like young Bond and his 6 other friends like movie or whatever, I like the way, one thing I really appreciate about that opening sequence, which goes on for a while, I want to call this the first couple of hours of the game, it really is, like, there's a sort of mission that they've all got to accomplish while just out for a night out. That's, you know, that you see there sort of, I like that even though things change, I think that getting there feels very slick to me. And like that opening sequence is really slick all the way through to that first proper mission, which I do want to talk about in a bit of detail, because I think it has that same effect on, it had the same effect on me that Paris and Hitman did, of like, oh shit, look what they can do. Where you all of these young 00s are sent off on a mission together. Oh, there will be no spoilers in this, but they all get sent off on a mission together, and Bond, being the one no one wants to be there, is that draws the shortest straw and is like given the shittiest duty and the worst cover story and all the rest of it. And I really like the character development of him just never sitting still, really, and never being content to kind of just sit by and do things, while also sort of having this kind of big sandbox environment that all of the other characters are on a mission in, where like part of the stealth challenge that's then introduced is avoiding the other 00s because they know you shouldn't be fucking around, walking around. Like that whole thing I thought was really fun as a way to do a big Hitman level. It's set in a beautiful hotel in Europe, and during the World Championship chess finals, it's a very IO like set piece, and you're navigating multiple levels of this environment and kind of unpicking something that Bond suspects is going on, while also like avoiding your own colleagues, and you know, while he's sort of quipping and lying to them on the earpiece and stuff. That stuff I thought felt really accomplished, and I think it was only possible because of having that big supporting cast, like framing the drama around that. And I wanted to return to that mission because I think there's a few things it does really well. But Jamie, like, does that match your first couple of hours with it?
Yes, it does. I think, as you said, the first couple of hours of this game are an absolute knockout. I think it might be one of the best tutorials ever. I think it put me a bit in mind of, because I agree with Marsh to an extent that like this is all a little bit copy paste, at least on a kind of white box level. But actually, a bit like that movie Creed, you know, which is a fairly boilerplate Rocky movie. They all have the same story. You know, there's going to be a fight and someone's going to win it, and you know, you're going to have to train and all that sort of stuff. You know, every Rocky movie is essentially the same. But like, and I've never liked any of them apart from the first one. And then Creed comes out, and it's a really good version of a Rocky movie, right? And this made me think of that. In that, like, yes, this is a kind of pretty boilerplate James Bond origin story, but it really cleverly draws energy from the fact that we never see those. I think the Broccoli's generally had a rule as to never giving Bond a kind of proper backstory, right? They always wanted him to sort of seem like he came out of nowhere, was birthed out of a volcano or whatever. And I wondered if part of the, you know, the transfer of ownership to Amazon meant that IO could be a bit more disobedient with that, because I think the movies have really struggled trying to make you care about Bond, who is in essence an arsehole, sort of go across the street to kind of get away from. And so they often have to try and find ways to, backport some, origin into him to, varying degrees of success, I think. It's almost like a joke in the movies, right? That like, oh, it didn't happen to the last guy. And like, I think actually GoldenEye, which I think is my favourite Bond film. I'm not a huge fan of the movies, to be honest. I love the books. But GoldenEye does probably the best job of it with Sean Bean. I think that does a really good job of kind of giving you a sort of origin story for him, which feels kind of vital without seeming completely off the wall. So despite the fact that this does kind of hit its marks quite heavily, I'm there for it. I'm here for it. I really liked it. I really liked the getting to know you stuff with the other characters. Who are in no way doomed, and I really enjoyed. Not only is it a training montage that you play through, it's even more ambitious than that, because actually you go into the training scenes and then you cut away to another scene entirely, and then you have them setting up their house, and then you're back in the training ground again. It's so slick and ambitious, and for me at least, like, yes, there's a simplicity here. You kind of know everything that's going to happen as it happens, but because you're James Bond and because you're sort of playing through this, and because it's switching you backwards and forwards in time and space, I felt a real connection to the other characters. I felt a real connection to Bond as well, who, when I first saw the trailer, I was like, I'm getting severely bad. Like, I'm going to nip to the loo and call my friend and tell her, right, give me a call in 5 minutes and tell me there's been an emergency at my apartment so I can get out of the date with this guy, right? He screams like bad Tinder date. But actually, once you've like kind of come up with him and been a part of him, he's charming. He's like the most successful like James Bond I can remember, to be honest, because you have a sort of origin for his roguishness, you have a connection to it, and you have a sense of kind of connection to him, which I was really surprised. Normally I hate guys like that. I see a guy like that in a bar, I'm like, oh no, he's gonna tell me you went to Cambridge any second now. It doesn't become a problem. These are very posh people. I was charmed by the fact that they get into their apartment and immediately go for a curry, because that is definitely what would happen in that scenario. Like, that is like British law, and I've never seen it done. So I really appreciated that moment. I do think the game wobbles a little bit, particularly in its kind of second act. But for me, it rallies and kind of comes back to it. It honestly, and we can talk around this more, but like, I think it puts the recent movies to shame, and I think it establishes this. And I haven't played the ending yet. I haven't finished the game yet, so I don't know if it all falls apart. But either way, I think it's now the most exciting, version of James Bond in town, quite easily. And I don't know how the movie is really going to come back against this, because it's such a good idea and it's so well executed, at least in plot sense, that like, I think it really screws them over, because it's hard to know how they come back against this one.
Yeah, it's really interesting, isn't it? Because I think, God, there's so many layers to this. I think partly there's. I did want to also just give for that opening. This is so boring. Massive shout out to however the fuck they're handling that amount of asset streaming. Like, it's so seamless. Like, I want to give a shout out to like what that engine is capable of now. Like, the amount of like cuts between like radically different environments, and like the way they've kind of pulled off the sort of a very important James Bond thing of like, we're just moving you to another exciting international location now, but seamlessly. All that stuff is really, and the size of the environments, like partly it's because there's a certain number of cars we've really got to spend a little bit of time with, because there's a chance you might buy a Jaguar. But like, the amount of time the game spends, like, its moments of slowing down are just getting you to like drive somewhere, like pull up, you know what I mean? Like, any other game would have you, the mission start with you stepping out of the car at the hotel, not like a mile down the road driving through kind of beautiful European countryside while characters talk, and then pulling up and seamlessly moving into those environments. That stuff's extraordinary. I just wanted to make sure to kind of note the technical accomplishment.
Yes, and they throw in just as a flex, they throw in a really good nightclub scene early on as well.
Yeah,
just because IO have always done the best nightclubs.
Right, and crowd scenes and the other thing I wanted to... Sorry, go ahead, Marsh.
Well, I was just going to... Whoever directed the transition between the mission briefings and then the opening of those missions, because they segue into one another almost seamlessly, that's some powerful storyboarding that happened there.
Yeah. It's genuinely, like, particularly in those opening hours. And I think where I kind of want to get to the mechanics of it a little bit, but as a James Bond thing, one thing that's really interesting, like, that first couple of hours particularly, like, they do the big bombastic, like, musical number intro with sexy silhouettes and all of it, and they do that stuff. And they also let you know pretty obviously that you're heading for that, like, James Bond theme needle drop all the way through the opening acts of the game, and they don't give it to you until the moment of most James Bond, right? But they do, and they'll deliver it. And similarly, there's lots of really cute bits of, like, level design, like you don't. This is not a spoiler. There is one kill, like, death near the beginning of the game that is sort of framed cinematically and is definitely, like, his first kill, which is kind of a significant moment. But the first time you ever actually get to draw a gun and shoot someone for real as James Bond, you drop into a drainage pipe. And a surprised bad PMC man turns around and goes like, "What the fuck?" And you shoot him, and it's the James Bond fucking barrel tunnel circle thing in reverse, which is so cute. It's almost too cute, but it's like, and then they'll do, like, the little, like, guitar, like, arpeggio kind of strings, and you're like, you fucking got me. I don't really even like James Bond that much. But the thing I would compare it to is, like, I think my favorite James Bond film as a piece of pop culture is GoldenEye. Even though rewatching it recently, like, it's a lot, that film. There's it's I think the closest.
It's got a lady in it who kills people with sex.
Yeah, it sure does.
That hurt my brain as a 10-year-old. I was like,
look, you can do a lot with sex. You can steal a helicopter with sex. That's what I learned from that film. You want a helicopter? That's how you get one. But I think a lot about, like, the Casino Royale came out when I was in, like, my first year of uni, and that was, like, a devastating fucking psyop on a certain, like, a lot of young men I know started playing poker, like, immediately, right, and going to the gym. But Casino Royale, which I think is definitely in my opinion the best of the Daniel Craig Bonds by quite a long way, is good because it's, like, even though I think it's obviously it's a movie of that, like, late noughties sort of Nolan Batman, what if no one was having fun in this fun thing? Like,
what if the war on terror was a war on Daniel Craig's balls?
Yeah, exactly. But like, that also does the thing of, like, holding back the James Bond theme needle drop and holding back all of the big moments, and it holds its, keeps its powder dry all the way till the very end, and is very, like, as the book is, like, pretty keen to undermine Bond in a lot of ways as well. And First Light, in its opening particularly, feels like a slightly more for me it's a much more successful balancing of, like, fun campy Bond nostalgia nonsense and character development than anything that the subsequent Craig films did, because the Craig films have such a bizarre pivot, like in halfway through Skyfall, where it's like half of it is a sort of Craig era kind of global thriller, and then suddenly it's like, we've got to open the big garage full of old Bond shit, James, it's the 50th anniversary of the franchise. and I feel like, even though there's nods and references and stuff in this, it doesn't quite, like, it does something more interesting with it. I think the counterpoint to this is, and I kind of wanted to voice it, is I feel like there's been very few things more successfully, like, replaced in pop culture than James Bond. Like, if you want, what if a very competent government man kicked lots of people in the head? Jason Bourne. If you want, what if a man was very good at shooting people in the head? John Wick. And then more pointedly, I think more recently, this game has made me desperately want this game, but slow horses, where you play as like Gary Oldman, and when you get caught, you can press circle to fart like that. And like, I don't know. I mean, I would probably do a pod about Slow Horses because I really do like it a lot, and I don't know if you've both watched
seen
it.
some of it. Yeah, I've seen 2 seasons. So.
But like, Slow Horses is a book series by Mick Herron and an Apple TV show, which is very good. Which is such, I think, a total dismantling of James Bond as a kind of cultural object, while also being a very good show in its own right. That it's quite hard to see this, and like that's the thing that I'm not sure how James Bond comes back from in some ways, because its 2 characters that are pertinent to this are River Cartwright, who is almost, both in terms of the performance and in terms of like age and look and so on, very similar to this version of Bond, but is very specifically a total fuck up and an idiot who doesn't understand that running a lot isn't the same as being a spy. And like, and Jackson Lamb, Gary Oldman's character, who is a more realistic portrayal of like the spy everyone respects, even though no one should, but he's sort of an inverse Bond in a lot of ways, in that he's sort of physically repellent, but ultimately probably the most moral person in any given room. And there's that to this as well. But yeah, I think like I'm fascinated to see what they do with this as like a Bond thing afterwards, because it is also so obviously like lavished in like official presentation, right? Like it's clear that they sort of want this to be. It almost feels like a kind of trial balloon for what the future of this might look like. It's
and there's a few things where they really hit it. Like the Q in this game is very kind of like a slightly more fuckable Desmond Llewellyn. And Gemma Chan is in this game. I don't quite know what she's doing there yet. Me and Marsh have in common that our mums have at various points thought we had a chance to be her girlfriend.
What?
Well, Marsh went to school with her, I believe.
Yeah. Yes, and a mum often still cuts out newspaper cuttings of her career for me. I don't know what she thinks is going to happen.
And I worked with her on a thing where, God, I forgot his name, Gary Tank Commander, that guy, went on a date with her, and that was fun.
Incredible.
My mum was like, "You should ask her out," and I'm like, "It's Gemma Chan." Also, she's with Jack Whitehall, as she was at the time. I can't compete with Jack Whitehall, the funniest man in Britain.
Now she runs the virtual reality challenge levels where you unlock cosmetics at MIA6. So
she does, yeah. She does.
So you know that. Yeah.
We've got Metal Gear Solid Subsistence at home.
We do. Metal Gear is another, I think, point. Like in terms of balance of like stealthy bits and set pieces. The thing, I do want to
say a little bit about how that first big set piece mission works in the World Chess Championships in a hotel somewhere in the Carpathian Mountains,
somewhere non-Europeanly distinct. Although I think it is actually a specific place. But yes, it's worth digging into, because I found that a really interesting. Like, it is, the whole game is more linear than any given Hitman of late, right? It is. But I think that mission particularly, I had a sort of smile on my face the first time, because I could tell I'm being channeled, but it does a really good job. I feel like it's almost like, sometimes it's a bit too heavy-handed, and certainly later it gets there. But it's almost like, I can almost see the tooltips they've deleted, where it sort of lets me discover an interaction or something in a way that just feels organic enough for the whole thing to kind of like, fold together really nicely.
Well, they've done a good job of presenting you with choices at different levels of granularity. So the proposition before you is that you need to get inside the hotel, and broadly speaking, there's like 3 main opportunities for you to do that. You can jump over this ledge and do some shimmying, which is very exciting. Or you can somehow blag your way through the main entrance, or you could do a third thing that I didn't bother to properly discover. But within those 3 options, there are many smaller options you can choose. So how you jump over that ledge, you need to distract somebody to do that because otherwise it would alert people. And you can you have some gadgets on you. You can make them sick by injecting them with a dart so they're distracted, or you could turn on like a faucet and have the sprinkler system wet them. I'm sure there's a bunch of other ways. In fact, yeah, you could set a wheelbarrow full of leaves alight. Some of these are like very canned options, like the wheelbarrow is a special prop that they've devised specifically for this interaction. But a lot of them are kind of dynamic, so you can make anybody sick basically with a poison dart. And as you go, you get more and more of these gadgets, which have you're free to use at any point, and you fuel them with bleach for some reason.
Look, one of my favorite things about this 50-year-old franchise is how many batteries and little things of hand sanitizer James Bond steals.
James Bond, obviously iconic stealing of poisons and batteries as he wanders around like some crazy kind of crackhead. It's like
he fucking loves batteries, that man. Anyway,
and stuffing them into his watch.
Yeah. So you have lots of different ways in which you can distract or negotiate these individual barriers, and then there are the kind of the choice of the barriers themselves. And there's also a process of discovering what barriers are available to you. So you move into a new environment, and it's not immediately clear which way you should proceed. So you just wander around until you hear these kind of opportunities to eavesdrop on people, and they usually kind of tip you the wink to what barriers you can then vault and shimmy around.
And you've got in the same way that Batman has his detective vision, and as we remarked, the Sicilians have their Sicilian vision in the Mafia game we talked about. You have your Q vision here, which gives you it's detective vision. But,
Yeah.
I thought all of that stuff is very accomplished, and when it all pulls together, I think it makes for an absolutely spectacular sensation of improvisation.
Yeah.
Not real improvisation, but a really good ersatz version of improvisation that is superficially convincing enough to make you feel really cool.
Yeah, this is like Hitman has similar kind of opportunities, which is like their way of offering accessibility to that sandbox, right? Which is like, there's a lot of this possibility space is very wide, but here is a way to achieve this kill that will give you an achievement for, right? And we'll breadcrumb it. I think it's really smart because I think that feeling of improvisation is key. I think is really a good way of putting it, because as you're going through it, when there's sufficient opportunities present that you're aware that you're choosing one, for example, and when you don't hit like an awkward bit of scripting or something that you expect to work and shouldn't, which I did find kicks in sort of after that kind of spectacular intro quite a bit, it feels really seamless. And it is that sort of cognitive relief of like, I kind of know this isn't a vast sandbox. And there are regional limitations. You can't kill anyone, right? Like, you're only allowed to kill someone if they're showing lethal intent towards you, which is fictionally appropriate. You don't have your license to kill yet. And it's, they have fun with the fact that when that rule changes, of course, it's going to flash up license to kill because, you can now do that. But that makes sense in the fiction of the game, but also it limits the possibility space to like a more manageable set of possible outcomes for.
Yeah, that was what I felt like is like when this game's at its best, it takes a Hitman level and narrows the possibility space from 47 size to Bond size, right? Because you're James Bond in this world, therefore there's only so many things you can do, which makes sense at good points of the game.
And I think that's really important. I think the thing that I would also like, because I'd like to talk about because I think the area where it gives you the most granular freedom to kind of like express yourself through game mechanics is combat, basically, and some of more freeform elements of stealth. And I think it's worth dwelling on this, because my take on it would be, because you said right at the start, and I think you're absolutely right, you can't really apply film license to Hitman. And it's not just because of like license and nerves. I think it's because Hitman only works because Agent 47 is a sociopath, right? Like you play, and in different Hitman games, that's been like foregrounded more or less, but it's a really vital part of that character that he is basically this, cipher, and who kind of descends on an environment and navigates it almost like a kind of alien, like unpicking it in a kind of completely unempathetic way to achieve a kill. And I think it's this version of where they found a way into like a likable Bond is the fact that like in this version, and this isn't necessarily a new take, but it's like in a world of like increased regulation and automation and AI, you want someone with empathy and a bit of humanity to them, even if they're a fuck up, to kind of to counterbalance that. And that's why it's so important that he's not just a murderer running around shooting whoever, even though you can make people be sick into bins as much as long as you can find enough hand sanitizer. But the other side of that is, I think there's I really love, and this is a compliment, I love how like loose and forgiving its stealth is. And what I mean by that is, like, I think genuinely, and I know that like history of this podcast, a lot of interest in stealth games. It's very generous with letting you get out of a fuck up, and in fact encouraging you to do so. So the most James Bond system in it really is, if you're in an environment where people aren't you get caught trespassing or you get in trouble, and you're not in an environment where it would be normal for a guard to just shoot you on sight, which is treated as really abnormal. And that's one of the things that's quite disarming about it. Like, you get so used to stealth games where get seen, guns start firing, that to have a game where everyone has a little bit more humanity than that, where the natural response to someone seeing a stranger is, who the fuck are you? Not, I am a video game enemy and I'll fight you now. You have the option to bluff or to like feign, and they've done so much VO for James Bond, just baking up some bollocks about why he's in a room. So it's
they're really good.
I'm a gun inspector. Please drop your gun.
Well,
hope that checks out, sir.
I kind of want to do a playthrough where I intentionally fail every stealth thing just to see the kinds of stuff that he spins up, because they are very inventive and extremely good excuses that he comes up with.
Yeah, like there's a great one where because if a door is locked, you can just kick it open, but it's very loud and obviously disruptive. And there's one where you kick a door open and there are guards on the other side, and at this point you are free for this to just be a fight. Like, if you knock everybody out, it will say situation resolved, because guards also need to be seen by other guards or call other guards. You can sort of contain the situation. But you can kick a door in, this is in a museum, and then immediately try and bluff your way out of it when the guards turn around and say, why'd you did that? And he says, museum door inspector, this one failed. And then that's it. And there are enemies who won't be fooled by this, and there's other conditions on it. But that one system is very James Bond, right? Like, that alone is such a good bit of like, that's something, to the point, that's something John Wick or Jason Bourne or Agent 47 or any of these other characters wouldn't do. It really sells the character. But also it makes the world feel like a little bit more real. Like, you're not just transitioning from like social environment to game environment, even though I think sometimes it does fall on that a bit.
River Cartwright would absolutely try it on and then have the shit kicked out of him.
yeah, he would. Yes, he would. And I think and similarly, the melee, like the combat, like stealth is there's quite a lot to it, and there's lots of sort of options to kind of wiggle your way through things. But honestly, in a lot of environments, you just end up in a fight with people, and there's quite a lot to that system. Like, it has a kind of Arkham, counter dodge response thing to it, but it's much more analog than that. Like, and like there's oh, hello, potato. Indeed. And it lets you, like, that's where I think maybe this is a good way to counterpoint it. The macro level, like navigating the level stuff, when it's done well, gives you the feeling that you're improvising. And then those more analog combat and stealth systems, when it lets you do them, when you're in those set pieces, you actually can and are improvising. And there's quite a lot going on. Like, it takes a while to learn all the inputs and everything else, but like, you can disarm with a shot to like the hands or to the knees. You can shoulder barge people, in which case they'll drop the gun. You can catch a gun out of the air and shoot it. If a clip is empty, you can throw it at someone's head. And all of those things feel really like this is, I think, the thing that I think if I had to recommend it to someone to play purely for mechanical reasons, I really like it when the stealth bits go wrong and it turns to a kind of mad improvised fight where you do feel like you're kind of punching up against the odds or whatever.
And the environments are really reactive and fun.
Yeah, really, yeah.
I slammed a guy's face. Like, often Bond will use the environment and it's not perfect, but actually they've done a pretty good job of like, oh, he's going to hit him against this specific bit of statue, or like, I slammed a guy's face into a television screen which exploded beautifully. There's lots of little bespoke things they've done that. You can also, I believe the word is twat bottles at people and stuff like that. You pick shit up and just wang it at their head to give you a moment, and you could also make them throw up halfway through a fight. Like,
You've got like grabbing people by the ear and throwing them into other people, and then rolling over a table. Good. Yeah,
it's actually tossing people off ledges. Another excellent use of the ledge.
Yeah.
Yep. There you go. Ledge making a cameo there in tossing people off. Yeah, I mean, I would actually say that it's grab people and throw them mechanic is really satisfying. Like, it never gets old. And kneeing people in the face also never gets old. The thing I think is there's a distinct lack of drop in quality in the second major area of the game.
Yeah, there is.
I think on our Discord, we were all like, "Wow, first 2 hours," and then we were all like, "Oh, second major area, oh dear." And it was interesting because like I was sort of seeing that chat come in and going like, "Oh no, I'm still sort of enjoying this. This is okay. I don't know what Lenny Kravitz is doing here, but okay." I was kind of on with it. And then like the climactic battle of that sequence was just shit. It was just, I never had enough ammo for my gun, but the baddies were too far away for me to kind of, do the James Bond stuff. So that sequence for me, like a large portion of gameplay, was just running backwards to pick up some guns that I'd been dropped by enemies I killed ages ago, and then getting back into the fight. And it was just a very uneven, and the encounter design just kind of wasn't what, like later in the game you get these extraordinary set pieces in these kind of rooms full of gadgetry, and it's like a kind of firework factory vibe, literal fireworks at one point. And but at this point it was just, I didn't quite know, like, and as soon as the game starts to feel not as good, it's almost like the simulation starts to break down, and you stop feeling like Bond, and you stop believing in what you're doing, and the narrative starts to kind of make less sense, even though it's never really made that much sense in standard Bond fashion. There was I mentioned it on our Discord, but there was a bit where you're driving in now I can't remember what car you have in that sequence.
They worked really hard to make you remember.
But you're driving your
some sort of, is it a Rand Rover or something?
You're driving your Land Rover.
Land Rover.
And there's a bit where you have to get out of your car and climb up a pole and go onto a ledge,
shimmy,
undo one side of a bridge, go down, climb up another pole, undo a thing, and then the bridge comes down.
Yeah.
And I just felt, as I was doing that, I was like, this is shit. Fucking, what am I doing? This is a real low. Like, you don't even have a good chat while that happens. It's just like for like 2 minutes time, this game is bridge lowering simulator.
It feels like, even though this doesn't make any sense, I feel like at that point, after this extraordinary showcase, design and technically, of the first opening act, I was like, is the game tired?
The game did feel a bit tired.
It's like, I've been streaming assets like you wouldn't fucking believe. Just climb a fucking pipe and let me die. Like, it's, yeah.
Yeah, there's a few points in the game. It's sort of inexplicable where like the design language sort of just splutters to nothing like that, where it's just like, well, why is this happening? You have all these exciting tools, and yet instead you're making me kind of wander around trying to look through windows the wrong way so I can not use my Q watch to open a door from the other side. And it's just do that like, oh, I have to do that 7 times for some reason. And like, but what it feels to me like is maybe, I mean, I don't know anything about the development process of the game, but like that perhaps certain kind of sequences were codified before they had fully finalized the list of affordances which were eventually available, and they've made a really big effort to put all of those affordances in the first few hours. And then you get, like you're saying about the in the gunfights where you're constantly picking up new guns, like obviously that's an interesting and intentional feature that you're meant to be improvising. Each gun has a very, very small amount of ammunition in it, so you run out and then you have to toss it at somebody, you have to disarm somebody else and get a gun off them or whatever. But that doesn't work if everybody's a long way away from you. And like it just feels like, that the design for that level where all the characters are a long way away from you was decided well before they decided to reduce the ammunition amount. And there's lots of bits like that in the game, and I find it very uneven, like to the extent where some bits of it, I don't like that bridge opening thing. I was just like, what are we doing here? This is genuinely unenjoyable, just make work. And I don't know don't know why you didn't need to do this.
Yeah, it's uneven in a way that's quite well. I mean, I think this is the thing. I mean, I think I made this point in Discord, so I don't want to kind of over repeat myself, but like, Hitman over the course of its like episodic arc, the most recent game and its sequels, had its uneven moments, but you sort of lose it because I think the breadth of the thing ultimately, and also because I think that format allows for like polishing, and also because there's an expectation that every environment will be a sandbox of some kind. And I think for me, I'm willing to go with it when it's being more linear, and there are like it does rally, as Jamie says. I think there are moments that are really fun later on, even if they're linear and whatever, and really fun ideas. But I feel like the first time it sort of fumbles a sandbox, it loses a bit of your trust. And I think it's not just that sequence of like suddenly finding yourself in like third person cover shooter land, but with the previous game's tool set. But even the kind of big social hub before that, I felt far more on rails and less dynamic than previous. In that it's a sort of hub and spoke thing, and every direction you go in, surprise, it's shimmying. Like, but then also pointedly, and this is where we get to spoiler territory, so I'm not going to spoil it. But like that sequence, that second act as well, really fumbles like a big classic James Bond scenario in quite a surprising way, where it's like almost it feels like everyone involved gets sort of bored of like. I mean, it doesn't really. I can say without spoiler, there's a silly death trap, a very James Bond thing, and given how enthusiastically the opening of the game leans into every set piece and almost gives every bit and every big James Bond thing moment to kind of breathe, it's really, as soon as it was like almost disinterestedly moves on from anything like that, or from whole characters in some cases, it sort of like loses some trust, I think.
There are a couple of moments where they do the same beat where it's hard not to do this in an Alan Partridge voice, so I'll just have to do it. Like, you're there going like, oh no, James Bond's going to die. He's going to die. And then, oh, don't worry, another character saved him. Yeah. And it's like, that happens quite a few times. And it feels like a missed opportunity to do something cool with, the big laser going up the Japsy or whatever. It's like,
yeah, there's a weird thing that happens a couple of times in the game, particularly in that context, in that climactic moment. Which, I mean, just to emphasize, like this is the most pastiche scene in the entire game, right? It's the most pastiche, the most kind of evocative of Bond moment, and you'd expect them to be firing on all cylinders at that moment, if at no other point in the game, and they really flub it. But there's a weird thing where they sort of. The interactions are weird and halting, and some of that's just the way that the scene is composed and the pace of it. But then the way that you get out of it doesn't instantly make much sense, and then it's explained after the fact in like a throwaway line, and that happens again later on, where something completely nonsensical happens and then it's resolved, and then later James Bond goes like, what the fuck was that about? And then a character goes, well, it's because of this. And you're like, why? Well, I mean, it's just like, why cause yourself that headache of having to then retrofit some solution to a puzzle that was itself completely unnecessary? Like, it just very frustrating, especially in like super high stakes moments. I don't know if you've got to this point yet, Jamie, in Vietnam. Have you met all the three people?
Yes.
I don't know how this played out, whether I approached that in a way which wasn't then accommodated by the following cutscene. But like, there's a point where you need to infiltrate a building and go and see a man.
Sure.
No spoilers. And I did that. I got a disguise, went in. He was expecting me in disguise. I turn up, and even though he's expecting me, the cutscene is him going, "Who the fuck are you? I'm going to fucking kill you, you motherfucker." And then I say, "I'm with MI6. Please drink this potion." And they're instantly like, "Yeah, okay, sure." And they slug it back. And then they're like, "I love you, James Bond. Let's be friends forever." And it just makes absolutely no sense. And I genuinely barked out loud and scared my wife because it was so mad. And it's just like, why did none of that was like... So you could have solved that in a much easier way.
So in my version of that, I did it in the traditional stealth game way, where I stealth my way expertly through the guards after hearing a rumor of a back way into the property, killed a bunch of them, just straight up murdered these guys. And then one of them saw me right at the end, and so I just booked it for the door. So they're all screaming at me and shouting, and there was gunfire going off. But I knew probably if I hit that door, that would trigger a state change, which meant that I could just see the cutscene without having to do the bit again. Which it did, and I got exactly the same scene as you did.
Certainly makes more sense in your context, I think.
Yeah.
It made slightly more sense in my context, yes. Although the people who had just been chasing me and tried to kill me with gunfire moments before just despawned and vanished, and it was just Ian.
I mean, that's what, I think, obviously, some of that is just the wheels slightly coming off the simulation to some extent, right? And like it not accounting for things. But you're right, like that sequence, the death trap sequence, the only way I could describe it without spoiling it is if that kind of famous like Blofeld, no, Mr. Bond, I expect you to die laser scene, how as it's happening, the laser breaks and it stops, and Bond looks at Blofeld and Blofeld looks at Bond, and Blofeld's like, do you want to just go? Do you want to just go? And Bond's like, yeah, I think I actually would rather leave. And then Blofeld's like, do you want a coffee or anything? He's like, no, I'm okay actually. And it's like, oh, all right, I'll see you. And then they just sort of part ways like that.
And then Blofeld, as he's turning away, he says, I hope you find what you're looking for, James.
Like, a Land Rover. I do want to. I know I've over-egged it, but obviously it's a Bond thing, so the product placement is a thing, right? Like, pick which of these Omega watches you would like, etc. But I was really like, because this, there's a lot of like narrative talent on this team, and it takes a lot. And I was just sort of imagining, like, I do think there's a sequence, and this is not a podcast joke or a tinfoil hat thing. I do feel like there was a quota for how many times people have to say the word Land Rover at particular times in that second act, and it's one of the things that contributes to it because if you were writing tooltips for a game to tell a player what to do or request text or something, you'd say park the car or park and get out, park and enter the city, whatever it is.
Yeah.
But every single instance of that is park the Land Rover and enter the city. And also the characters will never refer to the car or a vehicle. They will say, I'll go get the Land Rover or I've stolen your Land Rover. And it gets to the point where I was like, okay, I can ignore this. But even that, like, climb the pipes, open the gate sequence that we've kind of bemoaned, I was partly wondering, like, is this in here so we get more Land Rover time? Because the Land Rover is prominent in that sequence as well. But there is,
it's notable. Oh, sorry.
No, I was going to say, I think, the moment I barked out loud, the moment I almost cheered out loud was the following sequence.
Yes.
Where it's actually, I think it is Jamie's too far away enemies. Bond's pinned down. It's the toughest, biggest gunfight of the game so far. Another character's had to run. He tells you, I'm going to go and get the Land Rover. Sure, Land Rover reference number 1. Then I'm running around, I'm just like, okay, any minute now, this fancy Land Rover is going to come driving through a wall, crush the guards that are about to shoot me, and we'll all celebrate the Land Rover, the real hero of this story. But then the character says a thing that shocked me to my core. They've blown up the Land Rover. I'm going to have to think of something else.
Yes. And what is the something else, Chris?
It's a different, smaller Land Rover that he finds in the desert.
Yeah.
Where?
That's where they grow.
I'll never tell. But what he does do is drive it through a wall over the people who are about to. So, and that was like, I was like fucking finger guns at the screen, hooting at that, because it's like, oh, you got me. I thought you were gonna do it, and then you told me you weren't gonna do it, and then you did it anyway. And it's incredible. It's just, I'd like to think that was someone with that mandate to mention Land Rovers 18 times in this mission, having the best fun with that mandate at that point, like inexplicably, like off-screen destroying one, replacing it with another one you've never seen before, like a panicking parent replacing a guinea pig, like just tremendous stuff, tremendous.
Just before that sequence, you discover the layer of an agent, and there's like a Always Sunny in Philadelphia conspiracy board, in there. and I decided to go and have a look at a couple of the post-its, and several of them said on them, "Please add some detail here." Right, which is what you write to your art team when you need them to add some detail to your art assets. And it was funny to see that, and then like that to be a kind of metaphor for the entire sequence where there was like detail missing. I hate to cinema sins, this thing, because it's like making games is so fucking hard, I can tell you, and like shit like that is so easy to do. But like it did make me smile that like the Land Rover and the Post-it, the parable of the Land Rover and the Post-it.
Yeah. Yes.
And yeah, just to throw this in here, when it comes to the point in the game, which you haven't got to, Chris, but when Bond has to meet a sexy lady who falls into his arms for no good reason, like... I don't know how to say this without sounding like a complete perv. They do it so well. Like they make this like really attractive lady that you meet and you kind of fall in love with, and is entirely disposable in a very James Bond way. Completely implausible person, scantily clad, wet. You're kind of tasked with saving her life and all this sort of stuff. And it's for some because they do it with a lot of confidence and like artistry as well in how they create and voice her. It's not awful and cringe and disgusting. It feels fun and camp and silly and sexy in the kind of way that you want from a Bond film. It's hints of problematic but nothing too bad, and I just think like having the confidence to do that, it would have been so easy to have him like no thank you, no sex for me, thank you, I'm James Bond. It's like but instead they have a fade to implied shagging.
Yeah. Well, the joke that they tag on the end of that is also very worth waiting for, but I won't spoil it all.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I
think it does get back on track narratively after that disappointing Lenny Kravitz sequence. I think the plot in general is a pretty good James Bond. There's a pretty good set of villains. Mm-hmm. Their whole deal is of the moment, I would say, in a way which will probably age quite poorly, but is still pretty cool, I think, and quite well articulated.
Yeah, and it means they get to lean into like IO doing like, ludicrous, James Bond bases, basically villain bases, which it really meshes well with their style. I mean, they made a bunch of them already, but like there's some really cool shit in there, and like there's some stuff in London that happened which I was really entertained by and was really good fun. And yeah, I think the game rallies pretty well. It does, I think, as you alluded to, Marsh, there are a couple of moments post that where you do feel like Bond getting tired again. Like you get a bit sleepy and the game just wants you to just hurry up and just do this bit and not worry too much about what's happening and just get on to the next bit. But it also to its credit, it in the sort of in one of the missions, like it really slows down when you're going towards the kind of one of the villain bases. It really slows down and lets you talk to another character and kind of get to know them. And sometimes those can be interminable.
I thought it was good.
But I thought it was really good. It's really good. The performance of the other guy I wasn't too sure of at the start, but actually I was really taken by eventually.
Yeah.
And despite the fact that this high security organization employs an army of Roombas to...
it is a largely Roomba security hole based infiltration. Just
follow the Roomba into the securely locked room. And not only once, I'm going to do it several times.
Yeah. Who are you and how'd you get in here? Well, I'm James Bond and I followed this Roomba.
That was the one thing in the game which really made me go, oh, come on.
Particularly because in that sequence, which is actually where I'm up to in the game, they put a poster explaining how the Roombas work in every room. For the benefit of presumably the people who work at this top secret building who might have forgotten. But also there is something incredibly funny about like the most secure building in London, layers upon layers of security, but they have a system where the cleaning robots have access to every room and no doors for the cleaning robots except the big double doors that are open for ages. And no one has seen the problem with this.
And when it says like, when it explains to you that, like, I was like, oh, I'm going to have to, like, catch a Roomba and then, like, get its microchip out of it and then put that in my...
No, I'm the Roomba.
Yeah, and it's... but all you do is just follow them through, like tailgating someone at a tube station.
Yeah. And there's quite a lot of, like, this would have been impenetrable if we hadn't added this 6-inch ledge to the edge of this particular water feature. Shit, he's done it again, the rascal. Yeah, I think it is silly. I think it's like that thing of, like, when you're having a good time and it's pacey, the silliness just sort of washes along with the fun of it. And when it's like, oh, I thought I was going to be sort of making choices here, but I'm just following a Roomba around, like.
Yeah, it's a tricky one, that, because that is a genuine flaw in James Bond. I mean, I remember going to see the movies.
Roomba-based security system.
Well, yeah, it's that's how MI5 fell. Because, like, James Bond is always on an axis of, like, sexy to silly, right? And like the movies, whenever they recast Bond, they generally start at serious and sexy and move to silly as the series goes on. I've said before on the pod, I think the Daniel Craig ones start with him furious at anyone implying that he is in any way James Bond. They're like, would you like a vodka martini? Would you like a chicken? Say, fuck off! Get the fuck out of my face, you stupid bastard! And then eventually, and then by the end, he's like jet skiing on an inflatable jack. Like,
firing Judi Dench out of a rocket-powered car.
Yeah. And, like, I don't know, I had the experience of, like, seeing GoldenEye, which is a generally not particularly silly movie. I mean, it is silly, but it's kind of... It is a very silly movie, but it's, but it gets so much sillier with the Piers movies. And, like, going to see them as a kid, going to see, like, Tomorrow Never Dies, or... These are really weird... strange movies made with, like, completely, they seem really unsupervised. It's like, yeah, this one's got Robert Carlyle, and he's a guy who's got a bullet slowly going into his brain that means he can't feel any pain, and he's going to fight you. And, like, and also Jonathan Pryce is sort of Rupert Murdoch in this movie, and there's an invisible car, and, like, they felt so incoherent that when I was a kid, I'd go to a Bond movie, I couldn't get my head around them, right? And it's almost like they would use the silliness as a sort of get-out clause. So it's like, well, we don't need to explain this because this is camp fun. And, like, you have to be so careful with that because, Casino Royale works so well, I think, because it doesn't bother with any of that shit. There's none of it in there at all. But this game, like, it flirts with it. It flirts with the silliness, and it flirts with going, oh, just go along with it. It's James Bond. It's supposed to be stupid, whilst asking you to care about a story and having a character that you do care about. So it's like... It's such a fine line to tread. And IO are also one of the most camp, silly, like, game studios as well. Like, they love stupid jokes. They love, like, an NPC dialogue line being, like, quietly hilarious or sarcastic and putting little gags in there. And so, and they have also struggled in their games with, like, depictions of sexuality in women. They've often been rightly accused of being, like, gross. And I've done a very good job of fixing that generally, I think. But it is like it is a kind of interesting space to be in for them. Perfect in some ways, but also, a bit risky in others.
One of my favorite things about that first, like, Carpathian Hotel mission is, I won't give any spoilers away, but you're basically trailing a suspicious character. And the more and it starts off that you think Bond's, obviously Bond's going to be right. You kind of know he's going to have had good instincts, but, like, it's got the steady escalation of, like, the magnitude of what this character that you're trailing is up to, kind of building and building and building and building to this big kind of moment. But the other thing I really liked about it, and I think this was, might have been their intent, but the other character is moving through the level like Agent 47 would. He's constantly switching disguises. He's killing people. He's kind of a sociopath. And it's like, there's this little moment where this is not quite what they do, because I think it would have been a brilliant sort of twist if, like, it wouldn't be literally Agent 47, but if, like, the villain was actually, like, an Agent 47 style character, not quite, but close. But, like, there's this moment where it's like, hey, this level is one thing for you, James Bond, slightly hapless but competent man with empathy, and another thing for this disguise swapping kind of, like, ghost murderer that is just gliding through the environment, and you're just picking up traces of them or seeing them at a distance. That whole thing is great. Like, I think that's such a neat bit of, like, handoff between the two styles of game. I just thought like that's a nice like way of almost saying like you're not him, you're this guy. You're the guy who will sort of like just yell sorry when he gets seen, and then like grab someone by the neck and smash them into a table. But yeah, I'm looking forward to finishing it. I think it's quite rare for us to spend so long on a new AAA, big budget, big name game. But I have to say, like, I'm glad that I is getting this kind of exposure. I'm really interested to know what it kind of means. And it seems to have done really well, unsurprisingly.
Yeah. I think, these kind of over-the-shoulder, third-person AAA Ledge games, they have been quite up and down quality over recent years. I think God of War Ragnarok, is that what it's called?
Yeah.
I always want to call it Thor Ragnarok. No, it's God of War Ragnarok. I thought was, very, had real problems narratively, in particular, in terms of how some of the choices it made with its characters, but also just the scope and size of it was just, scaled against its story. It didn't quite work. I thought Hellblade 2, which is more like AA, but that was another game that I thought was a slightly missed opportunity. The closest have been kind of the Spider-Man games, but generally I think over the shoulder AAA Ledge, it hasn't been since Uncharted, the original Ledge, that we've had something I think that kind of sparks a new kind of a bit of creativity that I haven't seen for quite a while. I think it's a really hard way to do storytelling. I think you're living and dying by the quality of your cinematics as well, and those are so hard to do. And IO haven't, for them to pull off, even one of the things that they, a sexy lady in silhouette dancing in the opening scene, and that not being awful, and the game is full of little bespoke things like that, which are just, you have to stack them to make these things work. And they don't stack everything, they don't get everything right, but they get enough right to, make them, give them a really kind of a really good opportunity to kind of go off in a different direction and do more stuff like this, I think, because, the Hitman games are fantastic, but they are, for the time being at least, they've done such a complete version of that you can play now that, is replayable, and, for them to be working in this space, I think is really exciting for them. And I also think it's exciting in general to the kind of upward AA to AAA pipeline, which I think, Larian have been the most recent sort of, beneficiaries of. And I would also, Atomfall I've been replaying recently, and I think that is another really good example of that. A degree or two below James Bond, but yeah, I just think good for them. It's it's an imperfect game, clearly. It's a slightly uneven game, but its ambitions and ideas and kind of goals are really clear. And just narratively speaking, they're just spot on the mark. They're just bang on. Great writing, which is just totally immutable, I think.
Yeah, I think the DLC for this game is going to be terrific if there is DLC, because now that they've got all of their affordances defined, I think what they do next with this will be terrific.
They could easily do 3 episodes. I don't think they will, because I think they probably had their fingers burned with the Hitman episodics, but I think that would be awesome if they did one a year for the next year. How good would that to be a couple of hours of play for the next year? I mean, people would love that.
And I think a nice way of kind of grounding it as well is those moments, particularly, and maybe it's just unfortunate they happen quite abruptly after one of the game's big peaks, but the way I would describe it is those moments where I think it loses its way a little bit is less about the game becoming bad, because I actually do think the core systems and the core combat is fun, and I just enjoy being in those combat sandboxes anyway. It's more that very briefly it becomes the game you kind of was worried it was going to be. You know what I mean? It kind of becomes sort of less than the sum of its parts rather than more. And I think the success of it, particularly, as you say, Jamie, that AA to AAA kind of arc, is in consistently, particularly early on, feeling much more than the sum of some pretty well-known parts. Like, I can be glib about the lead shimmying stuff, but when it's all working, you don't notice that it's dipping into that kind of toolbox that people have started to get a little bit wise to and other things like that. And that's an achievement. It really is an achievement to kind of like feel like it's sort of leveled up something, like a genre like the third-person action adventure game that otherwise feels so not solved necessarily, but certainly very known. Like, and I hope actually that this draws enough of an audience to kind of feed people back into Hitman. I think about that quite a bit. Like, I have a friend who doesn't play very many games, or maybe play like 1 or 2 a year, who's probably in that category of like playing Forza, still playing Forza, etc. But when he asks me for a recommendation, he's often asking whether or not the new big AAA narrative-driven action-adventure game is worth it, and gets frustrated when I'm like, oh, actually, my favorite thing I've played this year is a fucking strategy game or marathon or whatever it is, right? And it's like, no, play a real game, Chris. And I think this is like a nice bridge between those, and I think that's worth. In that case, the James Bond-ness of it acts as that kind of entry point for people who might never have otherwise touched immersive sim.
It's nice also to see the license holders for these big properties taking some more risks with what they allow games to do. I'm thinking of also Machine Games' recent Indiana Jones game, which is, similarly innovative, and I think probably even slicker than this game. But it's just, I mean, not that I'm desperate for like licensed games to make a big comeback. I think there's plenty of other exciting things one could do in gaming. But if Hollywood's going to descend into YouTuber crafted horror films, then at least we can. Least we can do is accommodate Hollywood in the gaming sphere in a more kind of comprehensive.
Won't someone think of the IP? Like that's...
I mean, it does seem like, for both of those examples, the IP holders have just said, do whatever you want. Just do whatever you want. We don't care. Or we don't mind. Like,
but do mention Land Rovers this many times.
Yes. We do need you to talk about Land Rovers. And we certainly hope there's going to be some sexy ladies. But beyond that, you're free to rock and roll. Yeah,
you've got this much time with Lenny Kravitz, but he is going to have to spend 10% of it talking about a Land Rover.
You can steal as much bleach as you like, but you've got to talk about the colour of these watch straps.
Yeah. It's available in everything from grey to winter grey.
They're all the same, though. You kind of pour through them individually, and they look exactly the same model. It's because they weren't brave enough.
Watch very carefully, man. You simply take the hand sanitizer and shove it into your watch.
The hand sanitizer goes in your phone.
Oh yeah, it's phone.
It does.
There is a very good moment early on in when you first go to Q Labs and they give you your overloaded device and you use it. I think there's various ways in which this can go, but like you can use it to overload the lights on Q's table, and then he asks you to try it out on something else, and there's a drone flying overhead, and you can blow up the drone, and it is the best version of a group of scientists standing up in shock from their table momentarily before going back to work that I've ever seen. It's just like, yes, please.
But you're going to have to go find some batteries after that.
He fucking loves batteries. You can't let him out of your sight. If you let him out of your sight, he'll be in all your small appliances getting the batteries.
Also, the other thing he loves to, we must bring this to a close, but the other thing he loves to do is pick up a document that has information on one side of it, in a beautiful animation, flip it onto the other side, see that there's nothing there, flip it back, and put it down again.
Sometimes
there was one
thing, there's one time. So since then, I will sometimes
flip everything.
Yeah. Did I flip that document? I'm going to go back and flip it.
I'm glad there's room for James Bond to be a man who goes through your office, goes through every drawer, steals all your hand sanitizer, steals all your batteries, flips over all your documents, puts them up the wrong way around, and follows the Roomba out of the building that doesn't answer any questions.
Listen to me, Moneypenny. I followed the Roomba.
It's not just a dance anymore, Moneypenny. I'm sorry, we can't
James.
go down.
Oh, James. I've set you from suck to blow.
Good. Well, we've been talking about 007 First Light for about the amount of time it takes 007 First Light to hit its first major misstep. So
maybe we could have this as the crowbar tutorial.
Yeah, exactly.
If you can survive it, you'll survive anything.
Yeah, cut this down to a montage. What a treat. I suspect that's all the time we've got, or had, to be honest. I suspect that time may have been and gone. But, congratulations to you both in your announcements, your games, and your books. And congratulations to Land Rover on really getting the money's worth out of that narrative team.
Tired Land Rover, wired Ledge Rover.
Yeah.
Ledge Rover.
Nice.
Very nice.
I was trying to make immersive shim a thing earlier, but it didn't. I couldn't really get it out. But I've said it now before the clock starts.
Live and ledge die.
Live and let die.
Oh, no.
There it is. We fucking got there. Jamie, why have you been sitting on this gold until the closing minutes?
I thought of it so early on, but I gotta.
You can't hold out on us like that, man. That's.
I also considered then discarded from Russia with ledge.
You were right the first time.
I was,
right. Yeah. What were we talking about? James Bond.
Bond.
Yeah.
End the podcast, Chris. End it, please.
Sorry.
The copy.
Right. If you'd like to, thank you for listening to this. If you'd like to find out more about the podcast, you have to flip it over. And on the other side of the podcast, you'll find written the words cranegrowbar.com, which is also where you'll find details for our Discord community. Thank you to everyone who supports the podcast via Patreon. You can find out more about that at patreon.com/craneandcrowbar. And you can find us on YouTube, Crate and Crowbar, and Blue Sky, and all sorts of other places. That's it, I think. I have been Chris Thurston, and tonight they have been
Marsh Davis.
Jamie Britton.
Thanks for listening, everybody.